Black Eye Club.
Good.
So appreciate you getting that out. It was different than some of your other books, and it was like I did not know that it was because I guess I haven't listened to enough of you talk about the book. I remembered you saying it was like sort of because you had started a continuation of your gosh, what was the book where they were in Antarctica with the AI computer?
Uh-huh.
Quantum, was that quantum
Quantum Rapture? Yeah.
quantum
Yeah.
rapture? Thanks.
Yeah.
So I read that, and then you were doing part two to that, and then it morphed into this. So I didn't realize it was going to be fiction at first when I picked it up. It was
Yeah,
good.
those are the only two books I've written that are fiction, sci-fi. And it's actually a just a better vehicle to explain a lot of the concepts. So to me, it's nowhere less real or less like aimed at explaining things than my other work, but it allows the drapery of the story to sort of teach all the aspects because you have a human condition suffering underneath X or Y or Z and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I found like you had mentioned something about James the whittling down. I don't know your exact words, but like cutting away all the extra words so that the book conveys the information you want without a bunch of extra fluff, let's call it.
Yeah.
Was that kind of your purpose when you wrote? Did you have a lot of extra material and then you're like, what's the essence?
Yeah, that that book probably finished out like 28,000 words, and I probably have like 85,000 like already cut. So I don't know how many more, but just whittling away. A lot of those are for a different part. So this is the prequel, so then there'll be the sequel eventually. So book three. So part of book three is in there too.
Oh,
However, I do think that we're living in a day and age. When I was in school, a new concept came out called Cliff Notes, and it was this yellow and black cover, thin, super small, roll it up in your back pocket answer to something that you could cram before an exam on something. So you could have just the general idea or the theory of something. And in one fell swoop, it ruined people's love of, say, Shakespeare because it just takes practice to read Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, but only after like day three, where you kind of get into the meter and the rhythm of and more the expectation of what it is. And I remember being sad and happy at the same time watching Cliff Notes because so many of my friends just weren't reading, including me. I didn't actually find the ability to buy the Cliff Notes book as much as my friends do. That was considered contraband in my home. All of this is to say, though, that I have long noticed that the appetite for all media and book as a media has to stay frank with the where we are at. The days of Charles Dickens, who's going to go on and on for 15,000 words about the breeze and the smell of this of the Cockney Sea in the London streets, which it is all beautiful, but there was a time when one was looking for material to stretch out and read, and that time's not really here. Where we don't have just a few islands of literature now. We have it hitting us in the face from every direction. So it becomes important for all media, not just literature, not just my work, but all of us are forced to condense and shortify all the time. Even YouTube, I think, is to me, it's a really fascinating process that YouTube, TikTok, all the Instagram even have you fine tuning your ability to create a 1 minute long gist of something. And I get sad by this too, because there's certain ideas that I want to explore that I can't even explain it to you in a minute, more or less, then start exploring it. And so those ideas are never eaten by people. And so culture's changing in the sense that because our appetite is reduced, also our expectations are so much higher that what we're even able to feed each other has a different nutritional value to it, and only certain types of ideas are even going to be absorbed. And I find myself constantly challenged as a writer to, how do I condense this even more, even more, even more, even more? Okay, you went too far. Fuck. Even more. Wait, and this is it. This is the but this is every art. This is every business. This is every task. This is every breath. This is every life. So, it's built into to this place we have here.
I find that, so me personally, I find that when I get into a good fiction book, now I read a ton of nonfiction. I mean, I've got a
Mhm.
whole bookshelf here, but when I read fiction, which I fell in love with sci-fi and fantasy when I was a young kid, and I'll still read that once in a while, I feel like when the book is over, like I have to leave my friends. So I like having a long form book, and same with YouTube videos personally. Like I like to download on my phone long videos and listen to them when I'm on a hike or
Mhm.
driving really long distances, and then really get depth and quality from a YouTube podcast or some sort of presentation. But what I'm finding is, like, we have kids, Heidi's are older, mine are younger. And even my 12-year-old, like, it is YouTube shorts. Like, they don't watch cartoons, they don't watch necessarily movies, but the kids are watching YouTube shorts, which is like
Mhm.
sped up information overload, 8 hours. And I'm not joking, like sometimes 8 to 12 hours a day of like this information feed of these 30-second or less clips.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, like, what does that do to our new people coming into the corporate world when all they've consumed are these really short bits, and all we as creators, and I really don't like James using the term like content creator, because when you read a really good book, I don't want to be like, oh, this book was amazing, it changed, I'll remember it forever. It was just a piece of content. Like, uh, do you still think of things that you create as content, or do you think of it as some other term? There's a lot of
Um,
stuff in there I just said, but let's start with that.
yeah, it doesn't really matter to me what the term is. People are going if you have three colors and you try and absorb my work, it's going to come into you in three colors. If that's all you can interpret the world as primary colors, and that happens a lot. People think weird things about my ideas because there's a simplicity that's waiting to interpret my work, and that simplicity requires it being, look, man, it's either going to be red, yellow, or blue. So we'll pick a color, James. And I'm like, but it's this puce. And they're like, dude, that sounds like yellow. And so it ends up being yellow, and there's not a thing I can do to change it. It's pointless. It's an arrogance to expect someone to accommodate me those colors. So I'm never communicating I used to only communicate to a certain reader, someone who would understand me. And I stopped doing that a long time ago. I more wanted to, uh, intrinsically place berries on ideas that would hang for a while after I'm gone, and that they don't necessarily need my name attached to them, but it's my opportunity to pollinate the vernacular and give someone an opportunity to explore more. There's usually a fractal inside an idea that I've found that I'm under the impression no one else has opened enough, and it's only that. The second I notice that someone else has already opened that, I tend to fly away and say, I will find something better to do. Forgive me, world, for trying to explore. I feel like I've committed a plagiarism if I'm not doing that to something new. So my purpose is not really to intrinsically change or touch anyone. It's more about my own exploration into forages that I think no one else has found before. That just really gets me off. So when as a writer, which is a pretty tricky term to navigate, and then to claim the words writer is one thing, and then to claim the words author is another thing, and that all of those mean something personal to me, but what they mean to me, no one will ever know. Because I don't write in that genre. I don't write in a how does writing change you genre. You know, if I did, then people would know, and I think I could find a little, nook and cranny and say, oh, this is what I found out about. I do think that all of our business life, all of our corporate life is a hermetic journey, and it doesn't matter really what you do. I may speak today about being a writer or a programmer or the freelance jobs that I've had as I left the corporate world to kind of become independently corporate. But none of those really matter because it was a personal journey, and that personal journey, even if I conveyed it, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. It might be entertaining, but it wouldn't actually convey the hermetic meaning that was carried with me, as I traversed.
A
Yeah,
Gnostic.
Gnosis 3, yeah.
Yeah.
At the Theosophical Society in America, which is in Chicago or just outside of Chicago. It's their third year they've done this. I spoke at the Astronosis 2. And this year, yeah, I was speaking there, doing something about virtual simulation and what reality truly is, philosophically, what that word means. So that's coming up in August 9th and 10th. I only know that because it's the day after Lionsgate, and um, there's interesting things about that date too. So yeah, looking forward to that. Things have been really busy. I this is my seventh book. I just started writing books. You asked about an introduction. I've only recently entered into the world. I guess not recently, but I guess 2020 or 2020, 2019. So I guess I've been doing this a while now, but I began and wrote my first book. I originally had co-authored a technical manual for Wiley Publications, which is a pretty big publishing house, several years ago as a programmer. But it was more of just a technical. It didn't feel like writing to me. So, although I remember at the time going, "Wow, I guess I get to call myself an author now," and I remember teasing myself, saying, "No, you really can't do that," because I was co-author on a book that the assigned a programming editor basically wrote, or they outlined, and they just asked different people to complete chapters. Anyway, all that to say that that's probably the first thing that made me think it was even possible. I always thought that writing was there's I don't know, you got to be born into some weird family and have some kind of underground ritual, and I don't know. That's just in my mind, that's what I thought. I'm not saying that I had any notion to believe that. That's just it seemed outside of uh of something that I would be deserving to call myself, let's say, is someone who could write a book and actually make a go at it, make it something that you could make a living at.
So you're doing I'm going to call you an author. You're an author because you've written 7 books and you do make money off your books. So have you ever thought, James, this just came to me. You used to, I don't know if you still have this practice, but doing a new moon fire. And have you ever thought of doing a book on ritual? Like there's so many people that love books on ritual. And it seems like, in my view, I kind of see you as like you're a little bit on the fringes of society where you live. Like you're not in a city.
Mhm.
You were on the outskirts of the corporate world. And now you, which I want to talk about this concept, made yourself independently corporatized. So what does that actually mean? But have you ever thought about like the whole shamanistic aspect of what it is you're doing and the ritual that you kind of have created based on these other, and I don't know where you got that from, but I'm assuming like maybe you heard about that from somewhere, but your idea of these rituals for, in my mind, there's like this whole neo shamanic or the new shaman of the earth that we're in now,
Mhm.
different energies. I mean, just throwing it out there. I'm not sure if you've
Yeah.
thought about it.
Well, I feel like in a lot of ways, all my writing has been that. And Blueprints of Mind Control really is a soiree, a first step, sticking your feet into the water of these tenets of mind control and just noticing how they're all over the place. And so even that, you begin to unlock the rituals that others are practicing on you, and corporations do this. New, fresh, green, clean, super. All these words were invented because of the ritualistic aspects of things that you and I are inundated with. And we can't leave the house. We can't go down a road without seeing a sign. We cannot avoid the colors or the signatures of the sigils that are corporate logos. And this is the same sigils that are the leaves on the trees are a sigil. But you and I can draw the silhouette of an oak leaf. And if you are lit, if you are at a certain level where you see beyond the primary colors, you're going to know that that's an oak leaf. You're not going to say it's a leaf. You're going to say that's an oak leaf, and that that's a special kind of sight. Not only can I communicate to you by drawing an oak leaf, but you can pick up on that. But at the same time, there's this lower level, lower resolution communication of that's a leaf. So you and I are transmitting two different things. I may mean one of those two things. You may interpret one of those two things. And I don't get to choose which ones you interpret it as, and you don't get to choose which ones I meant. And this is profound because we grew up in a world where communication was a court ordered thing. No, I communicated this, therefore you receive that. And that never happens. That never happens. You were dealing with a wide variety of aspects of reality, and we've made these assumptions about things. And so the ritual really just comes down to just finding yourself. If I was to write someone a book about specifically about here are the rituals to practice, I don't think it would ever work because I'd be afraid that somebody would read them and then try and practice them. And then the whole time they'd be regurgitating, but this is what it said on page 7. And so I stood and I did this, or I read the words that this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I bumbled my way through it. This is most of what gnosis is. When you go to school, there's nothing wrong with having something regurgitated to you. There's nothing wrong with it at all. We have to learn some way. But only the person that has saturation is going to take what they were forced to regurgitate and make it their own and associate into it, and it becomes them. And there's nothing school can do to, I've never seen school try and amplify that. I've never seen school work to stimulate how to amplify that. I've simply seen we have to make sure everyone's regurgitating. And I understand that. I think teachers are brilliant. I think they're patient as fuck. I think they do more than I would ever be able to do. So this is me telling you that they've tried to write a book the same way. And you're never going to be able to teach that because you're expecting someone to be a flower that's open to a certain degree that they're not open to yet. They just haven't bloomed that way yet. And we'll never be able, I don't think we'll ever be able to educate that because these things are a journey that's solo. The word hermetic means hidden. It means closed off to a special few. It's sealed. It's And it's sealed not because no one's supposed to know. It's sealed because if everyone tried it, they would say, this is awful. This is not the thing for me. This is the worst kind of education ever, James. Your Gnosis core, right? So there's Common Core. Then if James had Gnosis core, it would not work either. I would fail completely. You guys would burn down my house because I ruined your kids because I was trying to teach them Gnosis. Do you see? It's not going to work. We can only push to a certain point and then, see who sprouts from that. And the lessons that we teach people are never actually the lessons that we really truly want them to find under gnosis. It's really not it. Santa Claus is a perfect example. Like to me, we tell our kids about Santa Claus because your children need to learn that they can't even trust their parents. I'm just saying, deep down, the only person that they can trust is themselves. And so Santa Claus becomes this beautiful kind of weaning ceremony that parents do. They're telling their parents they're telling their children something that is intrinsically a lie. And they're doing that out of love. I'm not saying everyone does this, but I'm saying if you watch it, what happens? This is probably why the Santa Claus ritual works, is because the child's able to develop on their own the gnosis, the wisdom that, hey, this isn't real. And when they reveal it to them, it's a grand exposing ceremony, but the child entered that place themselves. You're not going to be able to give your kids a PowerPoint presentation and explain how foolish they were to think, Timmy, we have gas logs. There's no way Santa's coming down through the propane pipe. It's not going to happen. And frankly, I'm a little ashamed of you, Timmy, that you believe, that's not going to work, right? So we know that there's going to be people that are going to be believing in Santa Claus. I think a lot of people, that's what politics is. And it's okay. They've been taught, but you told me that politics is real. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And only a few of us kind of figured it out. And so this is where we will always be. We will always be here. This is not a sign that things are broken. This is what a trellis in the garden looks like, right? There's just different altitudes, and different vegetables are going to do really well at their own altitude. And it's not going to be the same as every other vegetable.
So are you saying that this gnosis, this ability to take in more of reality? So
Mm.
the rote memorization of school, like we learn these facts, and I would argue that school maybe could teach more gnosis, that they're teaching us this rote memorization and regurgitation with a certain end goal in mind, in my opinion, right? This forced public schooling that most people have to go through has an agenda that leads to a certain adult individual, if you can call people adults if they're not
Mhm.
thinking for themselves. So when they get older, they all have the same collective memory. We all have the same collective memories of what happened in World War II and what happened in World War I, and all these things that we learned in school that we regurgitated. To me, it leads to this collective remembering of history that we all share. And you could certainly direct the learning in other ways than the way it's directed.
Mhm.
And what you're saying is that the fact that some people begin to comprehend that they're not being told the whole truth and they start to seek out other information. What, either in you, James, or have you observed in others, what triggers somebody or causes somebody to be
Mhm.
hungry to learn more? And how do they wake up to the fact that they aren't being told the whole truth and there's a
Yeah.
lot of lies being cast?
No, it's a great question. Yeah. I think it's appetite. All genius is appetite. There's not I know this. I'm not This sounds like a trite thing to say. I literally know this is true. I know people that have zero vocabulary, some of the poorest vocabulary in the world, and they are phrenologically smarter than everyone else in the room. They know exactly the motivations of everyone there, but they lack the context to spell words properly. And when you say that we have these memories, those aren't memories. We've been It's true that we've been told things, and that the things we've been told while we were being told them, we remember that. But the part of the history itself is not actually a memory. It's a story, it's a fable that we've been told over and over and over again. And we're not actually schooled on our ability to understand history. We're schooled on our ability to regurgitate what we were told to see if we could repeat it. And so it's the ability to absorb water, to hold and retain water. And this would be what you would want for any kind of plant. You're not going to be able to tell the plant, you will drink and you will grow and you will turn. You're just going to be able to give it water. And you're going to give it too much water. You're going to be, fuck, I gave it too much water. And if you're going to find a dry, you're be like, I'm going to try and give it more water. All you can do is do that. Across the board, that's all you can do. It's not a teacher's job to invigorate genius into a student, because that's I think that we would end up not, it's sort of like insisting everybody who is being special because we're going to send them to a government agency and brand them with a label that says special. We're going to burn their skin with with this laser that says you're special now, and now they're going to feel special. It's like that's it wouldn't, there's no way it would ever be able to emerge from that. It's only going to emerge, genius is going to only going to emerge from, are you in parasympathetic, are you safe, do you have food, clothing, shelter, are you in a state where you're digesting food, where you feel safe with everyone around you? There's step one. Number two, how many free calories do you have? That's a biggie. How much intrinsic free play is such a waste, like the most beautiful waste of calories you're watching him play, because your kids are just like, oh, and then this, and then this, and then this, and they're just there's oh, it's just, okay, what is that, popsicle, okay, fine, yeah, and and the reason why that's genius, right? You know, that plays genius because it's the wanton abuse of calories for no other reason than we're having a good time. And this really is at the heart of all genius, I think. So to put a child in genius mode is all about pacing and about setting up the ritual for what they're about to go through, right? Well, you have to take piano because if you take piano, you're going to do this. And by taking piano, then you're going to understand this and this. You have to take, look, you'll understand it when you're older. This is what it's going to be. And that's a tough battle versus we're going to play music. It's going to be fun as fuck. We're going to learn how to make chords that, watch this, boom. Then you hit like the Jaws thing. And then like the kid's scared and you're like, yeah, we're going to learn how to do that and why that works. And and all that stuff. And you're doing the same thing, but you're introducing the opportunity for genius to thrive through the wanton abuse of calories for this purpose, for during this task. So where does this come from? It comes from, is Maslow's pyramid satisfied? But then in addition to that, what is the setup? What is the framework for what they've been in? I'm not a genius at math in school because I just had a I just had uh, a teacher that just felt, you'll understand this later. Stop asking me to explain a reason why we would need to do this. You just bear with it, James, and you'll understand that later. And that never happened. He never stopped and said, hey, remember 4 weeks ago when I told you that X and you got all upset because you're like, what is the intrinsic purpose of X, you fucking asshole? You know, and it's like, but he just kept insisting, no, you'll wait, you'll figure it out, you'll figure it out, you'll figure it out. Months later, I'm constipated because the entire time I haven't been able to take a breath because I've been holding my fucking breath so I can go back and now hit play on everything this guy just did to me. And torture, that's torture to me. It's torture because you're eliminating all the surprise, all the fun, all the adventure of everything. And you're preventing me from being a genius at math. I hated it. I hated math because of that. And I'm a 3D programmer. I've written a matrix rotational formula in JavaScript. One of the hardest things that I think you could explain someone how to do. There's probably a dude right now. It's like, that's easy as fuck. And that's fine. But I swear to you, that's hard as fuck. Rotating a 3D vector in not just 1 degree, but on a 3-dimensional matrix is very difficult to put your like get your brain in the right situation to even think about that. Once you solved it, it's great. You've got a formula, or you Google it now. But back then, you could not Google that. And so, to me, the genius of that was not because I had special powers. That's been solved a million times before. It was because I had an intrinsic ton of calories that I could put into that, and it would get me high doing it. The entire pursuit of it. That's really what a genius is. It's an addict. It's someone who's finding association in the discovery of something, right? So if you can find a way to inject that in school, but that's not really the purpose of school. You know, the General Education Board itself, Rockefeller himself, when they were defining this, even said, "Look, we don't need any more poets, man." Like that's like verbatim. That's what it's. It's like we don't need any more poets. Enough beatniks. Jesus, these beatniks. It's actually kind of that was after his time, but still, he was basically saying the same thing. He knew the beatniks were coming, and he was like, "We don't need any beatniks, man. We need farmers. We need railroad workers. We need steel workers. We need things like that." And I think that you'll find that people are genuinely happier in situations like that. People that you tend to meet people like me. I'm just saying on average. I'm doing great, but I'm just saying on average, people like me typically are not very happy. They just don't live a kind of satisfying life because they have a higher my stepdad tells this to me all the time. It's pathetic because he knows me so well. There's what do I fricking say? It's like, your problem is James is, you got too much smarts going on. You got to, look at me. I don't think about shit. And he's and he's right. Like he's so right. So I hope that I don't mind us being paranoid about stuff. I'm not saying you're being paranoid, but I just want people to know that I think that we could call it torture to insist that everyone be this enthusiastic, if that makes sense. It does lead to a lot more calamity if you if you don't have the ability to afford this kind of drug habit, we'll call it.
That's great, James. Okay, so as I've been listening to you, like some of the things that I keep hearing, like repeating in my mind are, I wonder what his childhood was like. Do you get that a lot?
Hmm.
And then
No.
all, and then um, I'm like fascinated by human behavior. And I think like just everything you talk about, I feel like I go into like that cartoonish, like being mesmerized and hypnotized by like the red, like the red swirling eyes when you're talking. But I'm like, I keep going back to what was your childhood like? Like, how did it form? How did it shape you? And what were some of the things that perhaps more negative that shaped, like what, and how you're a big, and I'm just going to say like a big thinker, like
Mhm.
you're a creative and an artist and a creatrix and all of it. Right. And were there positive things? Were there negative things? I'm really curious.
Yeah, so I think having a big appetite causes a lot of issues for any child, and I had a big appetite, and it was insatiable in that way, and so it probably led to some difficulties with with raising me. I think I was probably considered a high maintenance child just because I had a lot of interests. There was just a lot of things I was just way into, and it usually required a lot of things. I was doing like college. I'm not saying they're college courses, but for whatever reason, there was like going to like college in the summer when I was like 8 or 9. I don't know how this happened, but like doing stuff like that, and I think the biggest thing that probably molded me more than anything, honestly, was in second grade. Um I joined this group. It was the Chattanooga Boys Choir is the name of the group, and it's like 40 boys, and we would sing all over the world. We sang in Notre Dame, we sang in St. Paul's Cathedral, we sang with Mormon Tabernacle Choir, we sang with Kenny Loggins, with Dolly Parton. I mean, just great. We almost sang with Tina Turner. I was really bummed that didn't work out, but uh it wasn't the singing, although being on stage was interesting because it kind of got you hooked on witness. I felt high from the witness, but because I wasn't like a centered person, it didn't really necessarily warp me, if that makes sense, because it wasn't like I was special. In fact, the choir director was always, telling us how awful we were. Like he would read the local newspaper. I still remember him saying, and they delivered a somewhat wooden performance. And he just, for years, he could not live that down. It was just, that's all he would talk about was this one review we got. And by the way, I freaking love this experience.
Mm.
I think that some people would have called this child abuse today. I don't think any of it was child abuse. I think it was just this really high pressure situation. But I'm getting off track because truly what I think shaped me more than anything else was for basically a month, sometimes 2 months out of every summer, from second grade until 10th, 11th grade, somewhere around there, I was traveling somewhere and I was staying in someone's home in like an exchange student kind of atmosphere. So I would be in a German speaking family for 3 days, and their son who spoke English was called out of town. And so at the last minute, you're in a home and no one speaks English. Just over and over again, constant exposure to people and homes and the way that they were raised was something that I saw from a very early age. And I can't help but wonder if that had a really profound effect on me, because I understood the context of my parents much sooner, I think, than other people did. I understood their place in my world, not necessarily their centrality, but just their individual place in such a big world. And I don't think that a lot of people have the opportunity to do that. I think traveling helps, but I think going into someone's intimate house and not being able to talk to them through words and having to, for 3 days, try and gutturally communicate with someone, and really just that happening all the time, makes you connect to people and see things in people that others wouldn't. And so even that has always led my appetite to grow bigger, because I tend to be the person in the room that wants to find a deeper moment. That I'm usually like, there's a deeper, something can be deeper here. We can find a deeper note here. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be funnier, it could be more meaningful, it could be more authentic. I just want to be more present is all. And I feel asphyxiated if I don't have that. And I think that ultimately is what leads to all genius, is someone has an appetite, someone is entitled to feel more deeply in the moment. And so if you're in the DMV line and you feel entitled to have a deeper life, you're going to strike up a profound conversation with someone next to you. And if maybe you're not the one that initiates it, you're going to cause a butterfly to flap its wings in China that's going to cause them to have a conversation with you. It's the same thing. And the only reason why that happens is because you would have suffocated without it. So in a way, I think the deepest forms of genius are insanity refusing to be insane, is what that means, right?
Great.
People that
Mm.
insist on breathing deeper will find that air somewhere where others will just say, no, I don't need to breathe. I don't need that. So whatever causes that, I think, seems to be the biggest thing. And I think I had a wonderful opportunity to breed that, specifically because of the way I was raised. But I'd rather not talk about that, only because I'm going to talk about why I can't talk about that, only because I feel really fortunate for the gauntlet that I went through in my childhood.
Mhm.
And I don't think that I would have been the same if I would have had it in a different way. And I'm kind of thankful for some of the restrictions and constrictions that I felt I had. And I think if I talked about them, it's sort of like the Gnostics we were discussing earlier. I think if I talked about them, they would never be understood anyway. So I don't, but I'll just say this. I don't think that having a perfect childhood is doing anyone any favors. And that's a really weird thing to say. And in a way, I think the perfect childhood ends up making us break our children if we had one. We end up breaking our children to make sure that never happens again. Because ultimately there seems to be a very important step in the caning of the child, in the child noticing that their sacrifice is being refused by God, that someone else is being preferred over them, that it sounds awful and we don't want to go through with that, but I think ultimately that's really what leads the person to find themselves sooner. And the sooner you find yourself, only then will you start to say, I have my own individual appetite. And it's so much more profound than my stepdad right now, who just who watches a lot of Fox News. That would kill me. Not because it's Fox. If you get it, right? It's not because it's Fox. It's really not. In fact, if you had to pick one, that would probably be my favorite because they have more colors and there's more music and things like that involved, and it's more dun dun dun, tonight coming up, right?
Like
So
marching band.
yeah, exactly. And so I can't, he's never going to be able to teach me, son, you should have a more saturated consciousness than me. It's clearly you do. Go out. And he was never going to say that. He's never going to say that, nor should he. Because if he did, it would mean that I missed my opportunity to break through that epidermis myself, right?
James, what do you think is do you have children? I can't remember.
No, no.
Okay. What do you think is the most important thing like we could teach children? I'm really interested in like conscious parenting, and I've been a parent for 27 years and my
Yeah.
youngest child just turned 18 like this past week. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm kind of free." I haven't been free in 27 years. It's pretty amazing. Um, but like in your perspective, like what do you think is the most important thing to teach them then?
There's a lot. Um, Most of my work, especially lately, is I'm sort of a champion of selfishness. I believe that being selfless is a really dangerous word, and that when we are taught to be selfless, we are taught to abandon ourselves for the sake of others,
Mhm.
and that the moment that we see someone else suffering, we don't understand why they would get sympathy, because when we were suffering, we abandoned ourselves. So the entire strategy of being selfless is really just learning a new way to be cruel to everyone around you. Because if they try and show pain when you so purposely, graciously, in quotes, so purposely swallowed your own pain, then it's not okay. You're going to be burned twice. You're going to be double burned in that situation. And so I noticed that a lot of kids seem to be abandoned by a routine. The routine of, well, this is what we have to do, therefore your feelings are moot, is, I think, a big, big one. And it's not that kids' feelings should be told, that you should be, tell your kids your feelings are moot sometimes. I think that that's even part of it. So this is not avoid telling your kids it's mood. It's very specific. I'm just gonna make up this example. Hopefully it'll work, but I hope this characterizes it. I tend to say this to people when, if you were watching your parent drive down the road, and if your child was for whatever reason able to compassionate you or understood why you're upset, one of the things that you could teach them is that you could pull over and you could say, I do not deserve to drive down the fucking street in this state. And it's not even necessarily just about being upset. I'm talking about even if you're bored, or I didn't catch that moment. I'm not catching the moments. I'm pulling over. I'm creating a ritual where I'm stopping my my schedule, because I am more important than my schedule. And no one does this. No one does this. And we're taught all the time to abandon your feelings because you got to hear, you got to do this, you got to do this. And everyone should be fully present at all moments. I don't expect us to hold each other to this, but if you're not fully present in that moment, you're not helping the world by making sure you're going to be on time. You're probably going to run over an innocent animal because you weren't fully present. Or you're going to teach your kid that this is all that really matters, and they're going to learn to cut themselves off. They're going to learn to eliminate this part of themselves and live inside the schedule. And many kids are going to need that. I know people that really just want to have an appointment. They want to know that someone requires them to be somewhere Monday at 9 a.m. and that's their job, and they'll get paid for it. And there's nothing wrong with this relationship. But if you're going to raise a genius, that shit's not going to work. That shit's not going to work. That kid's going to have trouble showing up at 9 o'clock because at 8:15, that kid is not even in the room. They are completely absorbed into whatever it is that they're doing because they're in constant flow state. And I think we've reached a point where we're hopefully giving birth to flow state kids. And that's why the corporate world is breaking down. That's why most of the older business structures that we saw are gone. Because the world where we wanted someone to require us to be somewhere and sit in a cubicle or in a box is hopefully over. I say hopefully. I don't mind us keeping it along. I don't want everyone to be, as I've said before, a bloomed flower. I don't need you to be bloomed, but this world has never served people like me. This world of harpoons where everything's an appointment and that you only work between these hours and then you stop working. It's not that I work too much. It's that I am what I do. What I do is who I am. It just feels good. Just feels good. And I want to do it not because I'm being paid or because someone's ordering me. I want to do it because it's fun. And if we could get to that mode, and we're trying, we're doing it. It's just hard, especially if you're young right now. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this cast, because no one is talking about this corporate pivot that's required. But if you do not find your flow state, I think it's the same as the food, clothing, shelter. You and I had food, clothing, shelter at a point, and that there's another food, clothing, shelter flow state in there. It's maybe not necessarily the word flow state, but it's this identity. It's this intrinsically, what is my mutation in this world? Mutably, who am I? We're confusing it as I have gender dysphoria. But to me, intrinsically, there's just a psychological identity factor that says, look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a man. I'm not a woman. I'm not a banker. I'm a Bob. I'm a Jane. And we could argue that that's flawed, but I don't think it's flawed. I think this is a very healthy next process, very important next process. And I think it's an old process. The Cayugas, the Iroquois Confederacy, for example, when the Seneca were fighting with the Hurons, inside the Seneca tribe, you have the turtles, the bears, the foxes, although foxes may not be one of them, but there's definitely turtles and the bears. If you fought with the Hurons and you won, and the captives from the Hurons came into your family, if they were bear as Huron, they become bear as Seneca too. So they fit into your mutation. To me, this is profound, because you would think that if you were going to assimilate someone, you would want to erase their identity to reinvigorate them inside. It's just standard, blue book of how to take over a country and enslave a race, stuff like that. And this is not that. They're doing the opposite. They're letting them keep this mutation. I'd like for you to imagine that our quest for what is my gender right now is really more akin to what is my quest for my spirit animal? What is my quest for this other? It's just another form of identity, is all. Another form of like, I relate to the bear more than I relate to the eagle. And that my mode here on this world is more eaglish than it is bearish. And when you and I have eyes, we came from a world of, primary colors. And now we're looking at, 1.5 million shades of color now. It would become necessary for there to be different mandalas that have sprung up, different ways of understanding each other, because our resolution has gotten so much higher now. And that this would have only happened through genius, through that wasting of calories. What I mean, the wanton just blowing of calories into a certain genre for no other reason than just because it's there. So these are all really good signs, I think, of what's happening.
So I'm so glad you ended with calories, because I've had this written down on my birthday napkin. Not my birthday napkin, but on my stepdaughter's birthday napkin, of calories. So can you explain, James, to the people listening? So they're, Bob, who's listening to this podcast, is like, I eat food, I have calories. Like, I don't know what he's talking about. Most people want to lose calories because they want to lose weight. So when you talk about calories, what do you mean by that? And why might we need more of them to make this pivot, this corporate pivot?
So the only reason why I use the word calories is because energy is sounds like an infinite term, and we still have this romanticism about free energy devices and things like that. And when you're dealing in the corporate world, you're like, let's give it 110%. And guess what? That math does not work. It's it just doesn't work. And so if we're using flawed math to describe something, then maybe we're flawed. And we are. That just doesn't work. So let's start accounting for energy. Let's put a measurable number on energy. And one of those things you can really think about is calories, because you're burning, 2,500 calories roughly, if we take the traditional idea of calories a day for a man. And so you're going to roughly burn 100 calories an hour. What's going to be? What's it going to be? So every minute you've got roughly 2 calories. So every 30 seconds, you're basically burning 1 calorie. And what's it going to be? Your entire life is going to be measured by every 30 seconds. Which calorie did you burn? What did you do with that? What were the thermodynamic exchanges that you made for that? Either you thought shitty about yourself, or you cleaned your room, or you sent a letter to someone you didn't really want to send to, but it's important to do, or you sulked, or you balked, or you daydreamed. And that only through calories will we really understand where our morality lies. Our morality is not based on whether or not we would give someone energy, because then if we don't have energy, we just get to say, yeah, I would help you out, but I have no energy. When we think about it in calories, we are now responsible for not having energy. And this is the ultimate test, I think, of parenthood too. You're ultimately going to be held responsible not for whether or not you spent the energy, it's whether or not you have the energy to spend. And the only way that we can track how much energy we have to spend is to talk about it in an accountable way. And so every sacrifice, every mental state that you have requires calories. Every posture that your body holds requires calories to hold. And if that is one of doubt, that's going to be some calories. If it's one of hope, that's going to be some calories too. So it's not even like there's a better thing, but in a culture where we're always trying to optimize, I think it's important to realize that we're burning calories every day. I'm evaporating. Red blood cells are dying, screaming their death right now because I'm talking to you. They've died, and they're going to keep doing that. And one day they're going to run out. One day my bone marrow is going to be dude, I'm done. Screw you. You had a good chance. You blew it, James. Maybe I don't know what it's going to say. and it's going to stop. And when it stops, my morality stops. Everything that I'm doing stops. So it makes every moment count. Remember, we came from a world where it only counted from 9 to 5, or worse, church on Sunday. So you can be holy as long you just have to hold that holiness for 1 hour every week, and then you can let go. Or you just have to hold the be responsible for 8 hours and just let go. It's that kind of
Ja-
thing.
James, why did you say morality? Did you mean mortality?
No, I actually mean morality. I'm
Oh,
glad you
okay.
asked. Yeah, I think that we have a misunderstanding about what morality is. And I think that when we understand the finite nature of who we are, we really can tap into our morality because
Mm.
you, I think in the old world, we believe that if we could be measured on whether or not we accomplish something, then we're good or bad based on that. Then we get to pick accomplishments that look like they're hard, but maybe are easy. And then you get to go for those, and everyone thinks you're moral. But if you really look at if you eliminate the benefit that you get from doing things that look heroic in other people's eyes, you start to really understand, well, wait a minute, that's not really moral. If you're going to profit from something, then I would argue it's not actually moral because it's corrupted by the fact that you're profiting from it. I think morality is something where you're intrinsically going to be pollinating the world into a place that you would want to be in, or you're not doing that. And if you're here and you're not being moral, if you're not pollinating the world, and there's two ways of pollinating the world, but if you're here and you're not pollinating the world, I think you're being immoral. But if you're here and you're taking the 40% of calories that you could gather, because you need 60% of these. This is why I don't believe in 110% rule. If I was running a corporation, I would be like, I need your 40%.
I was just okay. I was just going to ask you this, James. So why give 40% to the corporation
Yeah,
and not
because
like 100%? Like
yeah,
give it
yeah.
all.
Yeah, because if you truly believe that you should give 110, we'll say 100%, if you're truly supposed to squeeze hard and give 110%, then you would have no ability to sustain yourself, and you would not be able to continue to work for the corporation. So that actually wouldn't even serve the corporation. So intrinsically, it's just a faulty thing. If you do not maintain 60% of your belief plasma in yourself, you are extending lifelines in a usury way to other people. You are committing fraud. You are claiming to have energy that you do not have. And if you're claiming to have energy that do not have, you're going to cause other people to feel inadequate, and it could lead them to do the same thing you were doing. And that's what we have now, where people are putting too much of themselves into something while they're insisting that it's only, oh, it's no problem, and that they're leading to this kind of immoral world. You have no choice but to be a bad person if you're constantly giving 100% to something. If you are always keeping 60% to yourself, I think you're actually kind of set up to feel like, God, I'm kind of selfish. Like I'm always looking out for myself. And I think this is a good place to be in, because if you feel that you're always looking out for yourself, I think you're going to be more generous. But if you feel that you're always giving 110% to everyone else, and you're always willing to, oh, he'll just help anyone, he'll give everyone the shirt off of his back, that is going to lead you to feel that you are entitled to a little bit of justice, to a little bit of, hey, it's time for me to get my back scratched. And this is why people steal paper clips at work. This is why. And those paper clips, that those aren't just paper clips. That there's a lot of serious theft that happens, I think, because people feel that they are not being treated fairly. And they're not being treated fairly because they are not maintaining their 60%. If you maintain that 60%, this is what's going to really, I think this kind of goes back to Heidi's question, because if you could show your kids how to maintain that 60%, if you could show them that, yeah, I know that your teacher wants you to do this, or I know my boss wants me to do this, but this is what I got. and I'm not going to do that. This is what I can do. And if we have to end that, if school ends, then it ends. If my job ends, then it ends. If soccer team ends, then it ends. Oh well, there's no more soccer in the world. You and I are still here. No one teaches this. And it's hard to, because we get so caught up in everything, right? But if you could teach that, I think you'd end up making a much more a higher fiber moral person, because they would not be able to abandon themselves, which sets up that ability to cheat and steal because you've abandoned yourself so many times.
Absolutely. It's like it's a whole thing about failure too. Nobody, in school, you
Mm.
can't fail, you can't blah blah. I teach my kids to fail. That's one of the things like I've kind of done that in the opposite. My kids did go to school, but I coached them before and after school. Hey, guess what? You don't need to get this grade because I don't give a shit about that stuff.
Mhm.
Like I care about your character. I care about, my daughter, she would be called into the lunch bunch because she's so compassionate, James, and she's so kind-hearted that they wanted her to go hang out with the kids who were autistic and special needs and hang out
Mhm.
with them during lunchtime. And because they saw her picking up, the one kid who some bully walked down the street or down the hallway and like hit the autistic kid's books out of her hands. And my daughter Artie, her name is Artemisia, she went and picked up the kid's books and made sure she was okay and sat and talked to her and put her arm around her. Like she's just such a kind soul. And so they asked her to come into the lunch bunch and hang out with them. And she was like kind of known in school for that. And like I would totally congratulate that with her. Before and after school, I basically unschooled them because I didn't have choices. Like at that time, a single mom, I
Mhm.
had to send them, whatever. But I did not want that thing that you were talking about to get instilled into them. I was like, no, we don't step on ants. No, we don't. Like, we do the opposite of everything that you're being taught. And so I don't know if that was confusing to them or not. And I don't really know my question for you right now, but I just kind of wanted to respond in that way. It's just like failure and how we're not allowed to fail. Like failure isn't an option, but it's the only freaking way we learn. And it's just so ridiculous that we can't fail. I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
obvious, but
I think that I have sympathy for why the system looks so dry and lifeless,
mm,
b- too, because of where we've come from consciously.
right.
Like, I think that there was a time, I don't think I've read diaries of colonial America. This mother's, I wish I could tell you the book. This mother's raising her child, sort of like Grapes of Wrath kind of setting.
Mm,
And she's explaining in her diary how she just doesn't know what else to do, but she's going to have to break her son. He's just too wild. He's too feral. He's consciously too much of a nutcase, and she doesn't think that they're going to survive the winter. Like the husband's dead or something, just something like this. And she keeps trying to discipline the child, and he's like a pony. He's like a wild horse that just won't be broken. And she's as plain as day, just as plain as day, describing some of the most horrific physical abuse that you would ever read in like a 48 hours special or something on Sunday night TV. And you're just like, and it's just plain as day. And then I tried this. And then I branded him. Then I tried, just all kinds of just crazy stuff. And I get it. It's so easy to go, well, that's because she's a cruel, evil lady, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. We can go there. Or we could go, what if this was just what it took then? What if in her genre, because of her consciousness, this was the only thing that she could possibly do to survive? What if that was just the case? And if you could see the world that way, I think we could understand a lot more about where we are now and about how well we're doing. About just seriously, just how well the drip emitters in this greenhouse have just served us, because we've just jaunted ahead so far, and that we're in this place now where only now do we even understand that the body is actually intrinsically good. This is not a spiritual thing I'm telling you. If your body has the right calories, it is meaning that it is a fully nutritious body, just average, that it secretes hormones that directly feed you if you are moral, that you are constantly rewarded in every kind of system for treating each other well. And that we, for a time, we did not know this. We thought that we had to beat this good into our children. We thought that we had to, right, we had to remove the evil by beating it out, which is really just another way of saying we have to smash them until the good gets into them and won't leave. And it's the breaking of the spirit. And the breaking of the spirit was our first enemy because we were trying to make it through the winter. And now we're in the point where the spirit is the only thing we want to be alive in our children now. And so we're coming around to this lesson that we've known. And I don't think it was wrong. If you cannot fundamentally teach food, clothing, shelter, you're never going to have a genius that's going to be sustainable. So you're going to start with the discipline that's going to become a Piscean kind of thing. You're going to have a giant legal system that builds itself in a corporate world that destroys itself over legal jargon, over just liability. If you think about how cruel we are to each other in the corporate world, it's mostly because of liability. It's mostly because we're trying to cover our ass. And we're trying to cover our ass because we treat corporate world so evilly. Man is allowed to treat a corporation as if he used to treat himself 100 years ago on the prairie. 100 years ago on the prairie, I could rob from you, I could steal from you, I could shoot you. In Rome, if you were considered an outlaw, Lupercalia was the time when I could kill you and no one would punish me because you're not a citizen. You don't count. And I think in a lot of ways, the way that we treat corporations now is that same kind of attitude. And so the ATM has to be completely bulletproof, right? It has to be completely the most difficult thing to infiltrate. And that's true for everything. All of even now when you walk into a store and you want to buy a razor blade now and they're behind lock and key, you're just watching the carnal. I don't mean this in the sexual way. I know that word means this, but it's like the carnal nature of us. We're still allowed to show our true colors against corporations, if that makes sense. And so it's giving us a beautiful mirror that we wouldn't have before. And it's showing us we've really, really come a long way. We're doing great, guys.
So, so I want to get your thoughts on like where corporations need to pivot. Like, what does the pivot move us into as corporations? And right before you answer that, I want to get back to something you said in the very beginning, which you were talking about the corporate logos as sigils. And the way that it's been explained to me is that a lot of these logos, they work on a subconscious level that brings something up, either emotions or something subconsciously that our brain latches onto. And so you had said like it means something different to you than it meant to the person that drew it for the corporation. But do you think there are subconscious, intentional subconscious ways that corporations generate their logos?
Well, so where should corporations pivot was the first part, and I don't think that there's anything that corporations is ever going to do right for a while, and that's fine. I don't think they're going to intrinsically always do wrong, but they're never going to be able to lead or to do the right thing. I don't think that see, once people understand that the United States once people understand that professional wrestling isn't actually real, you really can still look at the sport of wrestling and understand this is a really important thing, that it has a purpose. and you can understand how it works. There's this guy named Dwayne Johnson. He calls himself The Rock, and he goes on to film and television. He physically a very demanding job. So it's not even fair to say it's not real. It's even more athletic than you might have first thought. It's not so haphazard. There's also an alliance that you didn't expect, that the Dwayne will meet with Texas Chainsaw 4 for lunch, and then they're trying to kill each other the day before, and you. So we are not really ready to admit these things about the federal government, I think. And I think that the same thing really holds true for the petrodollar. I since since Ron Paul first hit the scene, he's been telling you about the petrodollar and about how, the silver in a quarter still buys you a gallon of gas, just the contents of the silver, but that quarter doesn't anymore because of how we bleed our own system. And we've told each other that, but no one's ever cared. No one's ever like fixed it. And the reason why no one's ever cared or fixed it is because it's actually not broken. And I think that we just haven't come to grips with that. We've all been told that we have to live in order to survive because it's the only way. And for a time that was true. I don't think that that's really what the future means. This is why the United States is shedding away and this Muppet public health government is stepping into place. There's the next government will be the world public health situation. And universal income isn't really necessarily a new idea. It's really more of just government understands its place now. Government cannot thrive on fear alone. Fear is definitely a part of it, but it's not enough. When the people wake up, when people come online, fear just doesn't cut it. So you're going to need something different. You're going to need just a better system in place. And so you're looking at this universal income being sort of like the next evolution of what would be necessary for us just to be more honest with each other about why we're all doing this. Our kids aren't going to school to learn something. Our kids are going to school so that archetypes, this is getting to your next part of this. Kids go to school so that the archetypes can have the same charge. We need the Iran archetype to be bad guy. Dude who has turban on head. I'm just telling you, growing up as a kid, if a dude has turban on head, that means bad guy. That's just what it meant growing up. And that if we do not train ourselves as a country in the same archetypes, we do not have the ability to relate to each other on a way to where we have kids with each other, we hang out with each other, we can tell jokes with each other, we can watch the same programs and laugh because the same social norms have been broken. So I think ultimately that's really all government is needed to do. That's really all it will do. And that's what it'll continue to do if it's going to thrive. And if it won't thrive, it'll just be something else. It's just more honest. It'll be a corporate government has always been the case. It's always been the truth of who and what we are. I'd like to think that we're just slowly coming into the honesty of it all. We're just seeing it all finally,
So as people begin to see some of those things, hopefully they begin to get to the level of watching the professional wrestling all around them and knowing it for what it is. And then there's typically phases, like they get angry and they go through all these emotions, right? And then they finally get to a point, hopefully, where some people get stuck in certain points. But when you get to the point where, okay, it's necessary and it's okay, think about the corporate world. When you start to know these things, to comprehend like what's happening around you, as men and women, James, like what do we do as we begin to wake up? Do we begin to exit the corporation? Do we just become more aware of what we are giving and being more sovereign in how we make decisions and not relying on the corporation so much to make the decisions for us and to outsource it?
Such a great question. I think it's important to understand that each of us are flowers blooming at our own pace, and that it's very easy for me to be with someone that doesn't understand that politics. I mean, look who's running this time around. There was a time when this first started where I felt inclined that these people were intrinsically wrong until they saw what I see, and that I don't believe that anymore. And that I think it's just so how corporations, first of all, corporations are going to smell you and they're going to know when you don't belong there anymore. That you're just not going to fit in with the corporate culture. They're going to smell you and they're going to tell. There's nothing you can do about that. You're not going to be able to hold the facade that long. And frankly, most of the corporate world understands the fraternity or the sorority of that place. And so they work on that fundamental smell level much sooner. And this is why we join fraternities in colleges. We learn to smell each other in this way and to just detect who belongs here and who doesn't. And that's typically who gets, you'll notice who gets promoted in corporate worlds or that. It's more of a social, who has the right social etiquette really gets you, I think, farther in a corporate world than anything else. And that's good. I think social etiquette's a beautiful art to be gifted at. I personally, I struggle with it sometimes, but it's not because I don't think society isn't important. It's just that it took me a long time to know that I don't need everyone to be at where I'm at. And if you can be in a corporate meeting with someone who's above you, who has more commas in their paycheck than you, and that they are less enlightened and that they see less in the world, I think this is the sage's journey. I think this would be a really good thing for you to go through, to understand that you're living in a world and that someone has more control and power over it than you do, and that they're not lit like you are. Their flower isn't even as open as you are. And that if you can learn to enjoy that situation and be moral, then you're doing great and you're going to have a really good time. And you're going to have a good time at it because the 60% you never left, it's always been yours. When they're demanding 100%, you know that that means they want 40%. And when they're demanding 110%, that means they want 40%. And that you're just watching them act like a child by insisting that you give them 100%. And you start to have a much healthier relationship with that person. You can, I don't mean child in a disrespectful way. You can have a beautiful relationship with someone that's not on your level and not in a condescending way. You can meet them exactly where they're at, and have a good time because, hey, it's, we're going to RC cars. We can play RC cars and you can have a great day doing that. It doesn't matter. It's not real. It doesn't matter. And so a lot of the corporate skills are teaching you the nuance of social interactions. So I'm glad we have that. We're going to need corporations for this. It's just a extended fraternity. We're going to need these places where we can meet each other, where we can have things that are important or that we think are important, or the P&L statements and stuff like that. That's good drama. We need that kind of stuff. We need the stress of those things because that's what allows us to find each other and lose ourselves and find ourselves again.
So as we go through the corporate journey, a lot of people listening to this are in the corporate world. I'm still personally in the corporate world, and I definitely resonate, James, with like everybody in the company knows who I am essentially, and everybody knows that I'm like the weird person. So like if you want if you want to talk to somebody weird, go talk to Thaddeus. Like, or if you
Yeah.
have some weird idea, go to that guy. Um, like, they know it, and it's you can't hide that after some point of being different. So what I hear you saying though, unlike most people that I talk to, they will tell me you can't work for a corporation. You have to, go do something independent. When you get to that level, like you absolutely cannot stay. Like it's the worst thing. Corporations are evil. But you're kind of saying like, no, you don't have to become an entrepreneur. You can have the journey that you're on staying within the corporation. It's the way that we are awakening and the way that we're learning, the way we're absorbing information, and the way that we're really thinking about it on our journey, looking at it as a journey rather than looking at it as like, oh, I have to get over here to the entrepreneurial world because now things are going to be different, right? It's always that things will be different when, and now you are not actually using the experience. You're just trying to get somewhere.
Yeah, and that's our biggest coping mechanism. So we tend to look for those things will be better here simply so we can kind of turn off for now. So we look for excuses to abandon ourselves in different situations, and we tend to use this carrot, what imaginary carrot, um, just to put off our lives for a while. And that's fine too, because my parents did this to learn how to gain more self-worth over their time. So they thought if they held their dreams until they retired, that's more than their parents before them did. Their parents before them didn't even have dreams, right? So we went from not having dreams to holding my dreams till I retired to I'm going to live my dreams now. So yeah, this is great. If you go freelance, if you leave the corporate world and you go into business for yourself, you're going to have to deal with corporations more, not less, because as an independent contractor, you're going to be your own corporation now. So there's no avoiding the corporate world. To incorporate is to create a body that technically is not a body. That's all. You're corporal. That's corporal. You're creating that body. And if that body is James True, the author or the writer, then that's the same kind of body as the Stop and Sip, the 7-Eleven store down the street. They're both entities that are built off the energy of belief. Someone believes in this entity enough to call it its own self. It gives it a sigil that it can relate to. It gives it a name that it can store moral value in. Other people can say this corporation's good or bad, their service is good or bad, and that I store that in the sigil of their leaf, their logo, right? So there's the purpose of sigils. But you're always going to be corporate unless you're a child, unless you're a neophyte. And if you go work at another company, you're just one of them. You're just a part of them. So I don't think that one is more moral than the other. Certain jobs, being corporate, being kind of dry in that way, really allow people to shine in other ways because those things don't matter anymore. It's the same reason why someone like a Jeff Bezos will work at Amazon in a shitty office chair for like 15 years, and then he's finally making millions and he still hasn't bought the shitty. I mean, he probably has by now, by the way, but I'm saying for a while he still don't do that yet because you're not really believing. You're not in that mode yet. You're still you're still inside the corporation making it breathe. So in a way, I think we need to fall in love with with what corporations mean. That it's no different than building a sailboat, and that sailboat is an LLC, and the LLC is a single hull, and it can get you around the world, but you're going to need this, and you're going to need this, and you're going to need that. So it's an opportunity to to create a plasma that's outside of ourselves, a legal plasma, which is such a beautiful. I talk about technology of belief all the time. In fact, I wrote a book about it because everything that we do here is about belief, and all legal aspects, all corporate aspects are just simply we believe that we're a corporation. We believe it so much that we have this, and we have parking lots, and we have payroll, and we have people whose lives they wear little jumpers that have our logo on them, and they go around Costco. That's how much we believe in our corporation. And that's kind of beautiful. That's really religion. It's kind of like we're practicing our own religion. We're creating our own little churches. And I wish it wasn't so dry. I wish that people would put more humanity into them. So I think going forward, we're probably going to find more humanity in these things. More localized things are going to be necessary for that. But also, witness finally is becoming its own commodity. That's the reason why universal income will work. The only reason why universal income will work is because witness itself does have value. And when you understand that your witness has value, we're seeing this now. I think that the future of corporations is going to be more about where you put in your social time is kind of feeding you, because you're gaining legitimacy inside of that. It could be croquet. I'm just all about croquet, and that my universal income comes from my croquet groups, my croquet interactions. You might say, how is that possible? And I'm saying it's the same way it's been possible to have a petrodollar. It works the same way too. And that really what you're doing by being into croquet is you're lending legitimacy, and you're editing. You're snooping into a genre and you're editing things and you're keeping it clean and tidy, and that you're creating a property, no different than if you buy a house. Now you have equity in this house. Well, you have equity in witness too. And this is a commodity we just haven't understood yet. This is why we have social media companies that are teaching us the value of our own witness by taking it from us, by using it, marketing it, monetizing it, making trillions of dollars off of us, showing us slowly, your witness has value. So as we learn that the witness has value, then the workforce itself changes and jobs can become more about, I'm not here to prove that I have worth. I'm here to prove that what I do has worth. And that's the new economy. And I don't think that we will even understand the old roles of how a business works. I think you're going to have a boss. You're going to have someone who's mad at you and you let down, but it's not going to necessarily look exactly like the corporate world does today. It's probably going to look more like a Facebook group. It's going to look more like that. Like that's the new government. It's kind of like that, you know?
I almost feel like as we walked through like the start of conversation number one a few weeks ago to today, we're moving through like 1984. And I haven't read that book probably since I was a kid, but I
Mhm.
remember like as you move through the book, it's you have these experiences and they're negative, and then you get to the end of the book and it's like everyone that's the characters, especially I think his name was Winston. I always want to say Winston Churchill, but it was Winston something. And he's trying to get away from Big Brother and like do these things. And like at the end of the book, it ends with like, and Winston loved Big Brother. And it's like,
Mhm.
and James True says you should love the corporation.
Yeah, it's if I felt we were more sovereign, if I felt that the individual man, if I thought that you and I could live totally alone and be self-sufficient and not go insane and be happy, I might not think these things. But it just seems we're so intrinsically symbiotic, humans are, that we find all our value in stories that we tell each other. We feel alive just listening to each other chatter, even if we don't like it. We feel that's our humanity is that. And the way that people light me up is not something I can mimic myself. I can light other people up, but even that I can't really do that to myself. It's I'm hijacking the witness of other people. And I think once we understand how valuable witness is, then we're just looking at a conscious economy. We have an economy built on consciousness.
Hmm.
And once that kicks in, I mean, it already has. It's not like I don't think anything's broken anymore. I used to, I made the trudge through just like Winston did. But when you notice at the end, most people wanted 1984.
Yeah.
There's not a 2 plus 2 wasn't 5 because of one evil Muppet who wore a tunic behind the scenes. 2 plus 2 was 5 because every single person loved having a proletariat telling them what the fuck was right. And until we know this about ourselves, and we don't, because we don't want to admit this about ourselves, we're going to want a slavery state. And that's why we have silk neckties, you know. We're gonna want the chain, but we're gonna want to create a story around it that means it's not a chain, but we still want the chain. It's like any other fetish. It's like any other addict who's can't say no to something. He's gonna justify it or give all these different reasons for it. So the love-hate relationship we have with corporate America is not because corporate America is evil. It's because we are waiting to put more consciousness into it. And once we do, then a lot of things will change, but it's going to take a while. And the reason why it's going to take a while is frankly because the abuse, it's so profitable to vandalize the system when everyone is trying to make it more conscious. It's the most profitable time to vandalize something because everyone is trying to make it more conscious is just losing. They're just losing energy until people finally just stop. And I think that ultimately that's what's been happening now. I think a lot of the Sinclair media had, I believe it was almost 200. It could have been 2,000. Gosh, I wish I knew right now so I could tell you. Sinclair Media had from 200 to 2,000 stations all say, this is a threat to our democracy. You remember this. This was
Yep.
like in 2020.
Go to YouTube and look it up if you don't know what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
And it's the same script that's being read by every single anchorman in all their stations. And only last week did it really hit me that this was such a beautiful gift to see this. It was like this exposing the program was showing itself to us. And it sucks that we didn't celebrate that more. It sucks that we don't look at that as here's someone pulling the veil, showing this is Toto showing you the wizard behind the veil, saying, look, bitches, look, here it is. And we keep seeing those signs over and over again. And I think that ultimately more and more of us are just going to start pulling the veil ourselves. Even when it comes to sacrificing or sabotaging our own business. I think in a way I did that. And I didn't do it because I'm like a super humane. Also, I did it because I was going insane and I had to do it. So it's like that. It's like more and more people will just have to find sanity by exposing what's going on. And it'll just naturally just kind of, I think, fix itself. I think it already is. It's just a lot of abuse and vandalism um, that we have to suffer through. We have to endure for a while. So, and we'll keep trying to make smarter cities. That's going to get worse because, they'll have to get smarter cities will have to become more vandalism proof. And so then they'll become more anti-human in order to do that. And then we'll complain even more about how evil it is. And it's evil because of how we're vandalizing it. So it's like this weird, it's not even weird. We always do this, but it'll get better, but it won't look like it's getting better. It'll get better only because your 60% is sitting back and you're watching the world slowly unfold and bloom, and you realize this is getting better. It's just kind of gross. It's just a lot of leaky juice on the way.
I heard today, James, I wish I could remember the full acronym, but like smart meter and smart city, it doesn't mean what people think it means. It doesn't mean smart devices like they're intelligent. It means it's an acronym and it stands for something monitoring and tracking. MART. It's like monitoring and monitoring, recording, and tracking. There's some acronym that SMART actually means when they use this term and when they refer to smart meters and smart cities. And it's a commercial term where they basically can both take your data and sell it because it's worth quite a bit, even if it's anonymous, but also utilize those meters in a reverse way to change things about your environment and your habitat. So I wish I could remember that full acronym. And I think it was Josh Del Sol. He did the In Power, Take Back Your Power documentary about 10 or 12 years ago on smart meters. And then he quit that organization completely and went off and did spiritual work instead, which was interesting. But he had this thing on smart recently on a friend of ours podcast. And I was like, oh, I need to write that down. It's really interesting that we're building more ways to monitor and track what it is we're doing and bringing it to light in a commercial way because many of us are not able to do that on our own. I almost think like the whole smart thing and the social media thing is like feeding ourselves back this information that we don't want to see in a way that we can
Mhm.
digest it a little easier.
Yeah, yeah. You know, uh, I wish I didn't have this role because I think I'd sell more books if I wasn't this way, but I have more compassion for the corporate world and why smart cities are really don't have a choice but to create themselves. And it's America is the highest incarcerated country in the world. More people incarcerated here than anywhere else, and we're considered the most advanced society. And I look, you can say, and I would have joined you for a long time, but then I just kept reading. You could say, well, the reason why we're the most highest incarcerated world is because we're the highest. We abuse criminal justice the most. We could say that. We could say that's the problem. And if government would fix itself, all these prisoners wouldn't end up in prison and they'd be doing well. Or you could look at it more realistically and say, no, maybe the reason why we have so many people incarcerated is because people don't want to be out of a jail. They don't want to be out of a prison because they do not and are not ready for that yet. Doesn't mean this now is everyone, of course not. But when you look at a reoccurring offender rate where it's so high, how many people that leave jail just find a quickest way possible fast track back into jail? And when you think about what the jail is giving you, it's giving you a kind of security that people would have killed to have had 300 years ago, 400 years ago. The indentured servant would have lived the high life as a prisoner. Having the ability to have those things in that way, in that regimented way, would have been exactly what their neocortex needed to survive. And that over time, you start to look at all military programs as just simply training wheels, for people that aren't ready to stand fully yet. And then you start to look at corporations and you see why corporations have to dumb down so much. It's because these are different flowers. They're opening at different levels. And it's really fucked of me in the past when I've insisted that everyone be open at the same time. The the mind control will continue until sovereignty improves is sort of like a joke thing that I've made since Blueprints of Mind Control, but it's really held true as just the way it works. That if you have a system where people want the regimented stability of a life that's very similar to prison, well, you don't have to call it prison, they are going to request and require that the government build mind control into the system for it to work. And that if you were to ask yourself what would be an effective government, knowing that these are the population on the ground, it would look like this. It would look like this. And so it's a weird place to be where I'm at now. Someone who came from these world of conspiracies and is explaining in a more calm way than I've ever felt before just how important this mind control is and how easy it is for us to wean ourselves off of it, how little it would take for all of that to end. Because quite frankly, the government could not survive without our witness. And that the witness we give it is exactly because it treats us the way that we want to be treated, which is why we have the world that we have today.
Yeah, we're sort of talking about criminals in prison and our door opens. It's a little unnerving. It made me think of Jason Bashir's when you were talking about that, like how he wanted, you obviously know archaics.
Well, I don't
He's-
know the story you're getting ready. No, I'm
Oh,
not.
oh,
I do know that yeah, there's a guy Jason Braziers who does archaics, but that's
yeah.
about it.
Well, he wanted to stay in prison. He
Oh,
was
did
like,
he?
that's where he learned and read 17 years. I think he was like, well, Thaddeus obviously knows more about it. But I think he was in for 5 and that he kept doing something and he was in for what 17 or 24 years. And he didn't really have to be there that long. Like it's just
Mhm.
kind of crazy. Um, but there's another thing that I read about too with 40, it's kind of 40%, kind of funny, recurring number here. And it was like 40% of inmates who plant gardens or get their hands in soil do not become a repeat offender and touch nature somehow. I just thought that was like really powerful. And I was like, oh, 40%, like there's some funniness to that number. But
Yeah.
and you know, I just sorry, I just like a little scrambled from the intruder,
Yeah.
non-intruder situation.
Yeah. Pull
but
over.
but
This is exactly what I was talking about earlier, where I'm not saying you need this, but it's like,
yeah.
this is the important time to stop and actually, yeah, this is more important, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like I don't know. I mean, with the criminal justice system and justice for criminals, but like it kind of likens back to when I spent some time on Pine Ridge Reservation, and I had this man who was teaching us about kinship laws. And he was like, and he took this stick and he drew it in the sand in front of us, and he's like, I'm in kinship law, and this is and then the line, and then you guys are in colonial law or colonialism. And he's like, I have to straddle that line, but I try to stay as much in kinship as I possibly can. And he said that if, somebody in their tribe kills another man, like then that man's family has to be taken care of by that person.
Mhm.
And it's just like it's so foreign to our cultured minds of like how could that even possibly be? And then oh my God, like what kind of man, like what would that family have to live with then? That's kind of fucked up too. Like I'm not saying like one's good or bad, but like the whole thing is super crazy and just so I don't know. Like it's just like who could even imagine a system that could work? Because I feel like there's so many flaws in both of
Mhm.
them. Could you
Yeah.
respond to that?
The, if your brother was murdered by someone in your tribe, it becomes your, in certain situations, it becomes your duty
Yeah.
to avenge. And so you would can be considered a failure if you did not uh avenge that in some way, whether it be killing them or whatever it is that, depending on the circumstances and whatnot. And you can picture a Turtle Island before the Civil War. You can picture this place, and that on one side you have this word kinship is a fine word for it. Matriarchy is another, where it's like, look, this is, if you want to live with us, you got to go avenge your brother. Because if you do not do that, you're going to poison the tribe.
Yeah.
You're going to poison them forever because you're not going to do this. And we have the exact opposite. We tell each other, no, you do not get to avenge this. You ask the courts, and they won't actually avenge you. They will just punitively punish someone.
Mhm.
There's no vengeance in it. And so they've removed all of that intrinsic responsibility out of it. And you could see how easy it would be, almost 30, like around 30% of the Cherokee was white. And I'm talking about the Northern Georgia Cherokee, the original Cherokee. And when people were colonizing America, what we were really doing is we were assimilating into the peoples that already lived here. And so you can see how someone would join the Cherokee tribe and suddenly be torn between these two worlds. On one side, I'm supposed to murder this guy. On the other side, these people want to hold a trial and have 12 people decide what should happen to this other person, and that it's important that they don't know him. that it's a better system if it's a stranger kind of a system. And you could see how people are going to do what they always do, which is, how can I leverage the opportunities of the moment to just have a better outcome? It has nothing to do with morality. It has nothing to do with what's the best future for America. What's the, it's none of that. It's about, how can I finagle the fucking system right now in this point to level up, to gain something. And as long as you see that, that's the unconscious part of humans. Until you become conscious, you're not going to be motivated by the guilt that you might feel for taking advantage of that. because you're in a lower state of food, clothing, shelter, and you are creating morality simply by surviving. Surviving is morality on a very root level. And the moment that you start to traverse past that, things get a lot more complicated and the math isn't as simple. So you have to start just trying harder. And I think mostly what we're living in is a world of people that don't want to try harder, that are going to completely lie and just manipulate the system, um, and return to jail, return to prison, return to corporate America, set their house on fire for the insurance money, claim an insurance fraud case, steal paper clips, embezzle money, whatever it is. We're watching our true moral state being reflected to us, but we're only seeing it in places where people think they can get away with something. So if someone thinks they can get away with something, then you'll see their true spirit. And so it's taking us even longer to consciously find this new place. And I think the biggest thing that holds us back the most, honestly, is charlatanism. The idea that we are going to believe someone who's going to tell us something that makes us feel better, and that really is the ultimate. That's the only litmus that we have now for people. That people that really are not morally living a good life, we're going to still listen to them and give them our witness because they're telling us things that frankly make us feel better. And I think that really is what steers us more than anything else. I'm included with that. I think it's very difficult to even understand this about ourselves, and to have the calories to even admit that about yourself is already a huge chunk. And, just most of us just aren't there yet. It'll take a while. And until we get there, it's going to be this other profiting ceremony where people who really shouldn't be profiting are going to profit because they know how to charlatanize everyone.
James, do you know the character? I think it's Steinbeck character, Junius Maltby
No.
from The Red Pony. I think it's one of his novellas.
Okay.
You're not familiar with that book
No.
with him? Oh, okay. Junius Maltby was like this really interesting character, sort of really short story. And he didn't know, I mean, long story short, obviously, he didn't know that he was poor. And he was like in the book, his character, he didn't have shoes, and it was set in like Northern California. I don't know, like kind of gold rush era. I think Steinbeck was that era. I'm not quite sure. Close to that. And he was like one of the happy. He would walk around whistling, and he would go fishing. He wouldn't like do anything, but he would just was, and he was just being himself all day long. And he would get his sustenance from the river, and he would tend to his garden. And like the women from the church would come over, and they would bring him clothes, and they felt so sorry for him, and they gave him all this stuff. And he's like, well, what do I do with this stuff? And he didn't, like, because he just didn't know. And they're like, well, don't you know that you're like the poorest person in this town or in this county? And he was like, it was like the camera that comes in and the character, and he's like, yeah. He was like, what? Like, he had no idea. And like, it kind of ruined his happiness once the society came in, the church came in and told him he was poor. I just think it's such an interesting story.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah.
That's actually the blueprint of mind control.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 3 easy steps, which is again in that book. I'm not trying to plug the book. It's just so simple. Once you see it, it's convince target they're broken is step 1. If there's something broken, you're poor. You didn't know that, I know, but you're poor, right? And step 2, the solution cannot be found inside yourself. You're going to need something else. And that's what the truth movement is. Hey, psst, here's the real truth. And I'm going to tell you this, but it's only going to be this. You're not going to be able to figure this out yourself. You're going to have to hear it from me. And the military does the same thing. The news does the same thing. Everyone does the same thing. So step 3 is typically profit from, because there's a reason why you're mind controlled. And typically it's to proselytize or to spread the mind control to other people. So people are given salvation if they can recruit others into this thing. So you're a sinner. This is the easiest one, right? Okay, you're a sinner. You're broken. You keep sinning. Step two, you're not going to be able to not be a sinner yourself. You're going to need something else. You're going to need some kind of higher power. Step three, you need to get other people to find this high power, and then you won't suffer so much later on. I don't think that I think religion's an important piece of your life. I think God is too. I'm just pointing out that when you start to recognize this really simple procedure of convince target they're broken, convince that solution is outside themselves, three profit from them being broken, you really just kind of understand everything because you step into any relationship, even the basic corporate relationship, which is, hey, you're broken unless you have our monthly product. It's the same thing. The marketing is built. You are broken because you do not see this. Your house is not safe without ADT. Your pests are going to invade your without this spray, or your roof is not safe without this warranty. All these things are the same thing. You are broken. You cannot fix yourself without our help. And if you tell everyone else about our help, then we will give you 20% off next time. So it's like, it's just if everyone could learn this, it'd be great. But also, I don't think that we're in a place where we're supposed to learn this, that most of us, I think, are supposed to go with the charlatan. Because if it wasn't for the charlatan, the people that are on their own shamanic journey wouldn't have the isolation of being recluse, which is really, I think, what finishes them. It allows them to complete their journey because not a lot of people are following them. So it's it's like there's an important part of this journey where people do pick the wrong prophet and follow them, and that wrong prophet is always the one that's doing really, really well. Like if you look now in the truth movement, whoever it is that's pulling in all of the people listening is typically following the blueprint of mind control. They're doing something to convince their audience that they're broken, that the only solution is me because I have this sacred knowledge that I acquired through this or through that or through this, and that I will show it to you, but you're going to have to serve me in order to get it. And that we have this desire to look for a captain outside of ourselves because we're trying to grow our own captain. And until we get one, we're going to need these training wheels. So even this isn't the place isn't broken. This is actually important because it's helping everyone learn along their way. This is how I learned. I would believe Liz Crokin, who I used to follow religiously when I first started, and just everything she told me about Pizzagate and everything that she told me, it dilated me more than anything else did, and that was what I needed to grow. So even that, the charlatanism is still effective. It's still an important part of this hermetic journey. It's it's an important part of the ladder that we have to go up on, I think.
Oh, I love that. And I don't know what happened to her, but I think that journey that everyone's on of like, you go down these movements like the conspiracy theories or conspiracy analysis or truth movement. And then if you don't get stuck there, you start to see that it's just another confined feeding operation to just draw you a little bit outside the norm. But if you can begin to see that those are just all different operations that are working out there, you can start to find those commonalities and change. And then you, at least what we observe is like, we tend to find ourselves by ourselves because as we talk, we're like, who could we even have a conversation about some of these things that her and I talk about in our entire life? And we're like, there might be two people that we know that we could talk with this stuff about that would have any idea, like could even follow the conversation. So you become more and more isolated, and that's a hard place to be.
Yeah.
So, as we end, James, what other things about the corporate life have we missed in today's modern world? Like, what else do you want to convey to people listening to this podcast?
I think that stop phoning it in at work. Understanding that work is the most important spiritual part of your day because it's the part that you are secreting resources from the environment for putting into. So that should be your spiritual work. Your corporate life is your church. You're going to find spiritual fulfillment and self-worth from people that are not you. and it's going to come to you in the realm of currency. And that currency is an important, if you think money's evil, fine, keep thinking money's evil, but this is not the place for you to be. You're not going to be ready. And if you have success, you're going to consider it an evil, which is going to serve you, because you're going to allow to put yourself back into the slavery program, which is fine too. I see nothing wrong with slavery. If you have a rough life, you may want to live a few generations as a slave, because frankly, it was just too hard. I have that too, where in my life as a writer, it's being writer's difficult. And sometimes you don't know how you're going to make it. And sometimes you just wish, man, I wish someone just let me be a computer programmer for a while. And so, you find these respites along the way. But I wish people would really throw themselves into their work on this 40% thing I'm talking about, but like really throw yourself in there when you're there. Really insist that the moment give you full fulfillment. And that when you're tracking yourself as being bored, understanding that you're contagious and you're spreading that sick, disgusting feeling around and stop it. Because the more bored other people are, the more they're going to check out, and the more other people are going to get hurt, because we're going to insist that mundanity is somehow fine, and it's not. That's the biggest trap, is that mundanity trying to compete with you for command over your normalcy, for what you consider a fully saturated life. If your life doesn't, if the moment you're in does not feel fully saturated, good. There's an entitlement there. You need to look at that. The person you're listening to isn't doing it for you, good. That means that you have a hunger that's deeper than this, and you should follow that, I think. So that's all I got, I
Oh,
think.
love that. Thank you so much, James.
What was that?
I said, thanks for your 40%.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for your 40%. Appreciate it. Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly. Keep saying that. I think it's important. Yeah.